Okay, after the technical issues, the next speaker is Nancy Gibson. She's the founder of Love Wildlife Foundation, dedicated to wildlife conservation and environmental protection. And she facilitates a lot of the government, acts as the go-between the government and our staff and educate people on wildlife issues. Nancy, you've got the floor.
Thank you. All right. So I'm here to talk about a subject that can be a little bit of a sensitive one, but I'm going to keep today very positive. Although we know that there are a lot of challenges working with government officials and government authorities. The challenges are not just ours. I think that's something we also need to realize. The challenge is also on the other end as well. So we're here to talk about that. So before I start, and I'm not allowed to touch anything on this table except for buttons. So if the presentation goes out, we have a backup plan. So I want to ask a question. How many of you in this room has dealt or works alongside government? Okay, so a little bit over half, I would say. Just to make sure, how many of you have never worked with government ever?
You will eventually.
Thank you, Annika. Right, so actually, if anybody that knows Love Wildlife, we scream collaboration. I can never stress it enough. Most of the things that we do, it always involves other parties, other partners. And I feel for us, that is the way that is the easiest way for us to work. And it saves on resources, and it also helps us create a bigger impact. So for us, Love Wildlife started in 2010, and we have been collaborating with I started collaborating with the Zoological Park organization, and they're kind of government, kind of private, but that's where we came from. And I found that there's lots of ways to work internally. There's a certain way to work that we needed to. So aside from the Zoological Park organization, we work alongside the Department of Natural Resources and Parks, Monterey, people within the parliament we've had to work with as well in terms of the laws, and I've done a little bit of work in Laos. Although I'm not there anymore, there's still some communication back and forth there. So, challenges. Let's get the challenges out of the way. And there's actually a really long list of challenges. And that is not, this cannot even tell you what challenges there are. But I think one of the main things is distrust. Now, we may distrust the government sometimes, and the government can distrust us. And this is not just Thailand. I'm talking about Southeast Asia. I'm talking about the whole entire region, okay? This is not geared specifically to any place. So why is there distrust, right? We have to think about the history of how NGOs and government used to work. So in the past, NGOs might go to the government and say, hey, you're doing something wrong, or they go and protest, right? And so the government's reaction to NGOs is the natural reaction of, you're here to attack me, right? There's been NGOs in the past that have done wrong things as well, or used the name of an NGO to do things that are not good, right? So just the same thing is, not every NGO is a good NGO. And this is what I like to tell students all the time is, you do the research and figure out if the person that is there that's telling you what you should be doing is the correct thing. You need to do your own research. So there might be distrust to us in that direction, okay? But at the same time, NGOs might not trust the government because they think they're going to be tricked or things never happen. Which a lot of times it goes into a bureaucratic process. So there's lots of bureaucracy and there's a lot of politics going on when you have to deal with the government. And that is not only us. It is their own bureaucracy and their own politics that they have to go through. It doesn't mean they don't want to work with you. Sometimes they just can't. Or sometimes they have to do 100 things just to work with you, and they have minimal resources. There's a constant change in command. I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room has maybe submitted a proposal, started to talk to do something, and then the person that was heading it moved. And then you're back to zero. You gotta start all over again. And again, that's not the fault of the people that you're working with, but the head person is not gonna go and sign it, and they're gonna wanna know exactly what you're doing all over again, right? If you are not Asian, working in an Asian country, I'm half Asian, I still have issues because I don't look Asian, okay? There's culture differences, there's language barriers, there's always that, you don't understand our culture, right? I grew up in the US, and so coming from the US, coming into Thailand, I had to try to adapt and understand the Thai culture. Even though I am half Thai, I did not grow up Thai. So that is something I had to learn coming here and keep to those sensitivities. Conflicting priorities, right? So we have our usual, we have our specific goal, we have our mindset. Governments have a different mindset. It doesn't mean that they don't have the same goal as you. We have the same goal, we just have a different perspective, right? So oftentimes, you end up going somewhere and you forget that governments have to deal with many stakeholders. They are bound by the law. And so we sometimes go in and bombard all of these things, right, to the government. However, it doesn't mean that they don't want certain things. Sometimes you have to work around it to get to that same goal with each other. Budget issues, not really, NGOs, we have our own budget issues, but I think the government process is even more difficult. They have a budget, but sometimes they can't use it. They have a budget, but it's planned 2-3 years in advance. So if you're talking about animal care, the year that you did the budget, you had 500 animals. And then that year you got another 500 animals. By the time you get the budget, you had 1,000 animals, but you only get a budget for 500. How do you work through that? Lots of hoops and hurdles, sometimes sacrificing visibility to work with the government, and there's lots and lots of regulations, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on. But there is a significance for collaboration. Anybody doing environmental protection, conservation efforts, wildlife welfare, we have to work with the government. Government agencies formulate the policies, they implement the regulations, they enforce the law. Or we'd like to help them enforce the law. Can help push paperwork internally. That was a little bit more on the grounds thing. If you're making friends with the government, just like we were mentioning in the group yesterday when we were talking about repatriation, is that sometimes you need to know people on the grounds. You need to get the government to help you push the paperwork, or it's never going to happen. Having certain permissions can also benefit in the NGOs if you have a collaboration with them as well. I'll get to that later. Non-government organizations, NGOs, we can actually provide the support for greater impact. We can provide added expertise and resources to the government. Flexibility in finding funds and how we use the funds, or having the funds there and we can access or activate it a lot quicker. When there's an emergency need, that's where NGOs can actually come in and help. And we hop over the bureaucratic process. Unless you're a really huge NGO or a huge international organization, You don't have a lot of bureaucracy within your own organizations. If you need to activate funds, you need to activate to do something, it takes you a lot less time to do it than the government would. So that's where we can step in and help them, hopefully when they ask, or we need to go and offer. So I'm here to give you a couple examples, and we actually have done quite a bit, and it would take me a really long time to explain everything, but I have a couple examples that I just wanted to give, and then maybe later on we can discuss other examples and how positive outcomes have worked for different organizations. But here's one of the first places that we started working with, which was the Bangkok Waterbird Breeding and Conservation Center. We did not do anything about birds. We actually were working on slow lorises at the time. It actually started with one volunteer. It wasn't actually us, and it wasn't our volunteer. It was a volunteer of a guy who somebody came by, gave him a slow loris and said, I'm not supposed to have this. So he went looking for a government place, and he found Bangladesh, which is it's not this place, but it's the same manager. And he's like, hey, I know I'm not supposed to have this, but what can we do with them? He happened to be an engineer and a builder. So he went in, he renovated enclosures with his own money to build a cage for one slow loris, right? And then he realized there was more. And that's when he contacted us, and then we started talking to the manager, and then voila, we ended up at this place and building enclosures for this place. So how we collaborated with them was we started bringing school children. We started bringing international schools. And once the international schools came in to learn, then they saw, hey, we need facility. There's nothing here. We want to be able to learn here, so let's give you money so you can build an education center. It was that easy. Then the school group started coming and they're like, oh, you have more slow lorises. We want to help get them out of the small cages. Let's help fundraise. So we had 3 international schools fundraise over the course of several months to buy materials to build a slow loris enclosure. So this was the first loris enclosure that we were able to go and build. Now there's quite a bit. We started with about 5 slow lorises there, now there's 120 something, so you can imagine that we can't keep building. But this was built by international school kids sending money. The same engineer builder, plus his friends that came to help volunteer to build everything, alongside with the government officials that were staying at the center. Another example is the huger on a broader range, which is the 30 by 30 target from the CBD. Okay. In this case, we worked with the Ministry of Environment, ONEP, the Office of Natural Resource, Environment Policy and Planning, it's a very long name, as well as the French Embassy, which was the chair for the High Ambition Coalition. So they didn't have a way in for Asia at that time. As foreigners, them trying to come in, talk to the ministry, they were met, even as government, they were met with a bit of resistance. So what happened was, we worked with an international organization and had the way in to talk with the ministry. So we asked advice from the ministry, we asked advice from ONEP. What do you guys think about this? Why is there resistance? What is going on? So we realized the only reason why Thailand didn't want to sign on was because the wording of the 30 by 30 goal. 30 by 30, if you don't know what that is to preserve 30% land and sea for the entire world. What Thailand thought was, we need to preserve 30% of each in Thailand, which was not the right wording. It's actually a global goal. So any percent that Thailand puts into it is actually contributing. So once the wording changed, then they were more receptive. Then we set up a meeting, so on and so forth. Once Thailand was joining, I think Malaysia joined as well, through similar means. And more of Asia started thinking about it once the other Asian countries started getting into it. So that was a trickle, for like a domino effect within the government to be able to do that. So we have Natalie as well, another chimpanzee story. I know it's not, sometimes it's frowned upon to be taking selfies with wildlife, but the reason why I'm having this selfie is because this was the last day. I felt that this was going to be the last day I was going to see her, because we finally were able to move her to a facility. So this was a goodbye selfie. She was actually interested in what was happening on the camera. This is why she's staring at it. So Natalie, we met her doing a training program several years ago, and we were trying to figure out ways to get her repatriated. But because she had no teeth, she had only 4 molars in the back because the teeth had been taken out or punched out. She used to be a show chimp, basically, and was handed over to the DNP long ago. And she was the only chimp within the DNP, so she had been alone for many, many years. Africa would not take her because she cannot be released to the wild. So we were stuck for a very long time trying to figure out what to do with her. In the end, we were able to contact Monkey World in the UK, who was able to also activate the UK government. So we worked with the British Embassy here in Thailand to work with the Thai government, because there was one important meeting that was happening a few months down that line, which was the IWT, the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference. So we banked on that to have a nice collaboration between the two countries. And we had a lot of backing with the higher up authorities to make it happen. They were pushing behind the scenes. They were trying to get the CITES documents going. It took months to get it done, but that even then is a lot faster than sometimes that can actually happen. Sometimes it takes years, right? So I want to show you a little part of her story. And there's no sound.
Mary's departure day. Soon she'll begin her long journey to Dorset and life with a new chimp family. Alison, they are having a final meeting with the Thai officials. They've been fundamental in granting permission for Nari to move to Monkey World.
For the journey, at least from here to the airport, she will sleep and be calm. Although you don't know.
They need to double check all the paperwork is in order. Having come this far, Alison doesn't want last-minute hiccups.
I think that's a reasonable idea. As long as she is asleep, should be no problem.
Nari's transport crate has arrived and needs to be thoroughly checked over.
That's good.
And all the relevant information for the authorities attached.
So these are sort of the final details. We'll also get her water bottles all lined up so that when we leave here late this afternoon, everything's ready to go, bar getting the chimp in the box, and a couple of blankets inside in case it rains in the meantime. We'll bring those back with us. But otherwise, I think we're good to go. Famous last words.
They're taking an early morning flight back to the UK. With a 200-mile drive to Bangkok Airport ahead of them, the operation to transport the chimp will start in the middle of the night. Paperwork completed, it's time to say goodbye to Nari. For those who've come to know her and have cared for her, it's a momentous but happy day. After many years of solitude, she'll soon be living with other chimpanzees in a new home. It's the middle of the night.
Good morning.
And the team have gathered ready for the huge task ahead of them. They must sedate Nari and load her into her travel crate before they can set off to Bangkok. Alison has spent some time getting her used to a syringe and needle, but at home, the chimps would have months of training.
This is the dose, and it's quite large. It's almost 5 mils. We'll pretty much bang on 5 mils, so it's a large injection. I don't know if we're going to win this game, but we'll see what we can do.
So all of this was done with the monitoring of the DNP.
With the rest of the team holding back, Alison and Jeremy head over to Nari's cage to attempt to inject her by hand. Nari's local keeper has been keeping her occupied. She may be unnerved receiving visitors at 2 in the morning. Alison wastes no time.
Good girl.
She manages to inject some of the drug, but the chimp isn't impressed. Unfortunately, Nari has not had the full dose.
Not ideal, in that we don't know the exact amount that she's got into her, but we're just gonna wait and see if we start sloping or getting relaxed and tired.
It's obvious that she isn't going down.
Should I go down and get it? Should I bring M with me?
The clock's ticking, and if they're going to make the flight, they'll need the help of M, the local Thai vet on standby further up the road.
I think we are going to need a slight top-up, maybe 1 or 2 mil. I'd like you to help look at her and assess her. She's still sort of holding, but her head, she's like this. So we could hand inject, I think, with a little bit more.
M has a top-up drug ready and manages to successfully administer it without causing undue stress to Nari. Now, it's just a waiting game. Eventually, the anesthetic takes effect. Nari is out for the count. The team move quickly. Nari is transferred into her transport crate.
Head towards this end, please.
The team need to monitor her until she comes round before fully securing it. She must be breathing clearly, fully awake, and conscious before she can travel. After an anxious wait, Nari comes round, and the vet team give the all clear to start the journey.
Hold on. So, next step is the airport.
In Thailand,
There we go. So that was actually, I'll show you, if we have time at the end, I'll show you her when she actually got to be released into the enclosure, when she reached the UK. After that, basically, there was a whole entourage, including the DNP, that followed Natalie all the way to the airport, monitoring her at every step. And that is, I share that with you because that was a really good collaboration. Although we tried to stay in the background of it all, it was still a collaboration that ended in a success. Even for one animal, it's still something that we consider that is still big for her, because she still has another half of her life left to live. After that, COVID, and while everybody was trying to survive a pandemic, we decided to be stupid and try to start a new program. We signed an MOU. In fact, at that time I was also still the director of the Bird Conservation Society as well, so we signed 2 MOUs to do work on an island called Gotmanai off Rayong province. So it's another good example of what we've done and how we've collaborated with each other. We were able to, I would say, support the goals that the DMCR wanted, and we were able to, with even less time that they would take, because they don't have many resources, they don't have a lot of people to do these things, is might take a few years to get research done. We were able to do in less than a year. And with the data that we collected, they were able to use it for zonation mapping and for announcements of MPAs, as well as applying for the biosphere reserve for the area. These are just a couple of photos that I wanted to show. This is all the collaboration that is happening in and around the island. We did some mangrove planting as well, but it's not the typical CSR mangrove planting. It's an area on the island that had some mangroves that started disappearing, and we had some issues with sediment coming in. And so we didn't know a lot about mangroves. And so we wanted to make sure that with our,
really in time, so you have to
with us doing something, we need to know what we're doing. So we worked alongside with the DMP experts, because they have mangrove experts, telling us which species should be there. They went down in a survey with us together, alongside with the Deputy Director General, which was really interested in the project for some reason. And yeah, so she came in and decided that's what she wanted to do. And we were able to get people down there. There was also a Marsai, which is a citizen science initiative. Basically, this is built protocol alongside the DMCR as well to collect data on discarded fishing gear, because people they just take fishing gear out and don't do anything about it. They don't collect data, they don't find out what's going on with the fishing gear. And although our MOU is with the DMCR, there is the other challenge which we need to think about next with this project, is that the national parks that are marine national parks belong to the DMP. And we don't have the MOU with the DMP yet, so it does take some time and loopholes and permissions, even between government and government, to work together. However, we were able to collect about 400 kilos of net from Gotchan working together. And yeah, I just wanted to, before I'm going to show you a really small clip of the release, if that's okay. No time.
We have 2 more, unfortunately.
He says no time. Okay. Well, if you're interested in, I can show it to you later or on.
I think this afternoon, probably, after the AGM.
Yeah. Okay. I won't be here at that time. But yeah. Anyways, just to conclude, from Henry Ford, coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. We do need to work together. Not just with government, but we do need to work together with everyone. And that's how we can make ends meet. That's how we can make things bigger for greater impact. Anyways, if there's any questions, and if we don't have time for questions, you can ask me later. Thank you very much.